tonight, get an interesting perspective from the liberal side of the aisle. It's always fascinating when I do the liberal view and the conservative view to see differences that you wouldn't expect to be so varied in our state of Massachusetts. You know, I've always said I'm particularly proud of the fact I know, Lauren, you'll never agree with me, but I have a hard time taking and distinguishing between a liberal Massachusetts Republican and a conservative Massachusetts Democrat. Both sides, I know, but both sides scare me when they're too far to either extreme. I like the people in the middle that don't vote dogma, that vote the issues. But I think tonight we'll get into it where you get out to the square states and it's all red, redder than red. The coasts seem to be bluer than blue. But somehow it comes down to the middle. Because I've been told that there's 20% that will vote blue no matter what. 20% that will vote red no matter what. It's the 40 to 60% in the middle that decides the election. So, why don't we start with introductions?
Sure. Christine Crane from Milford, Democratic Town Committee and State Committee, and drinking liberally.
Glenn Wyke, also from Milford. I'm on the Democratic Town Committee. I'm the treasurer.
And I'm Rand Barthel. I live in Mendon, and I'm a member of the Mendon Democratic Town Committee, and I'm also a member of the 350 Massachusetts Climate Change Action Network.
I love when you say I live in Mendon. It's all of 2 miles that way.
Right. Well, but it is a different town, and it's got different stuff going on.
Way more conservative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mendon?
Yeah, and if you get further west of us is where it really gets red. You get the great big Trump signs and stuff.
Well, Lauren, introduce yourself, then we'll get back to this, because this is
Lauren
fascinating.
Wilton, also Milford Democratic Town Committee.
Now, when you say it really gets red, there's what, 9 members of the Massachusetts Congress that are Republican? Doesn't seem very red to me.
Well, but you know, that's the net effect of how everybody in Massachusetts votes, and you know, and there's an area of Massachusetts that is to the west of here a lot, that where there are a lot of conservative voters, and the balance is different, and that's why we have state senators like Ryan Fatman, and you know.
You mean
So
the ethically challenged Ryan Fatman?
He is ethically
stop.
challenged. Well, he is ethically challenged, and he also is very Trumpy as well.
Racist.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Did you say that? I like the way you said that through the cough.
We're not going down that road,
But it's a
because
fun
he was good to Milford.
What? Wait a minute. Let's not go there. I'm not going to go
anyway.
there.
I liked the earmarks that came to Milford. I like what Becca's doing, what Brian Murray's doing.
Earmarks are good.
You know, everything's coming.
We like
As
funding.
long as you're white and he feels you're deserving, yes, he is very
Speaking
good.
of Becca, she actually is helping change a very outdated law in Massachusetts. Did you know it was illegal to do blasphemy?
Define blasphemy.
Taking the Lord's name in vain.
Or saying that you're God, kind of like what Trump is doing.
Well,
Yeah, that's another.
I
that
mean,
is-
God, who spiked the punch tonight?
Oh man.
yeah.
Wait a
so
minute.
they're going to be removing
Now I'm
that.
confused.
There was a-
Taking the Lord's name in vain.
Yeah.
Isn't there a pesky First Amendment that would
There is.
prevent you from?
This goes back to Puritan times. It was never changed.
It's one of those
These
old
little
dusty
tweaks.
laws
Yeah.
that's
This was once
still
a
on the
theocracy
books.
here.
And that
Yeah.
could get into an interesting discussion that we weren't actually planning on doing, but the whole transparency and the snail's pace of the legislature and all of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably
Is
should
that-
talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was in court Monday talking about a statute, which on its face, it would seem like online trolling is, illegal, And then you actually start doing the research and it's like, oh no, the courts narrowed it because of that pesky First Amendment, but the legislature never bothered to change it.
Mm-hmm.
But the First Amendment, in my mind, guarantees that you can be stupid, as long as
It
you don't.
does.
You know, because the skinheads came to Milford, and they come every 8 years.
It's like the
The
bugs
locusts?
that come out, the locusts and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like
Cicadas,
cicadas.
yeah.
Cicadas.
Cicadas,
It's
that's
like
right.
Thank
cicadas.
you.
They come out
Every
of the
17
ground.
years.
Come out of the woodwork.
And the last 2 times they've come, I've prayed, please, nobody pay attention. You know, as my mother told me, don't feed stray cats because they stay around.
Right.
But this last time, one of the Milford residents took them on.
Oh.
And you sit there and say, don't do that. I disagree with everything they stand for, except for the fact that as long as they don't bother me physically, economically, that they have the right to be stupid.
They do.
I suppose, but there should also be consequences for them to exercise that kind of free speech, and whether that's them being
Well-
shouted down or made to be made uncomfortable in public because their views are widely unpopular.
Or lose your job.
Or lose
because
your
it gets
job,
Posted on social media.
You know, those kinds of things should happen in those cases because they're preaching violence and hate.
There's where I draw the line. You know, when you say take the Lord's name in vain, okay, that is not telling me you to hurt him or do something bad. But if you're preaching violence, then to me,
Yeah.
you've crossed
Right.
the line.
Yep.
Because the Lord can take it.
Yeah.
So what would be the consequences on the books for taking the Lord's name in vain?
I think it was like a $300 fine or something.
Oh, God.
Wow.
That's pretty steep if it's that old on the
Yeah.
books.
Well, I'd be broke.
Yeah.
So would I. Isn't it like that, you know, $15 or 15 cents?
Get the little jar,
Father
yeah.
Guido
Yeah.
Sarducci.
Like the swear jar?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Now, one of the big issues that is coming up, border security, because the borders now have extended. And I know there's a lot of criticism of the governors of Florida and Texas, but I don't know that I can blame them a lot for busing immigrants all over the country and making it a national problem.
So lying to them and coercing them, manipulating to get them on the buses and the planes, and then shove them
But
elsewhere.
didn't
See,
I
if-
hear the
You're
same
Not
That's
thing?
telling
okay?
the people, the governments that are running the destinations that they're coming. So all of a sudden, all these people just show up and we don't know what to do with them. That's not.
It's one thing if you're doing this as part of an attempt to draw a good faith attempt to draw attention. It's another thing if you're doing it as a political stunt, which is what this was.
And the taxpayers dying.
You know,
But how
along
else
with
would they get-
along with the far more outrageous crime against humanity of putting all of this razor wire in the Rio Grande to
God.
snag little kids and drown them.
I
Yeah.
had somebody comment saying, well, they knew what they were getting into when they crossed that river. Because I think, you know, you call yourself a Christian and you're allowing this and this is okay. Well, they knew what they were doing when they crossed the river. Now, that's sad.
It's so, I don't mean to sound, you know, craven or anything, but like, why is it a crisis whenever there's an election?
Yeah.
This is a humanitarian crisis. If
going
it's
on
a
for
crisis
years.
of any kind,
Right.
it's humanitarian in nature. And if we actually wanted to fix this crisis, right, there's legislature pending before Congress right now. But instead of actually trying to work and get it passed, we're trying to impeach somebody.
But now, didn't we have a stay in Mexico policy to
that
stop?
they had to stay in Mexico while they're being processed.
Yes,
Or that
that
kind of.
if you're coming over the border and you're fleeing because you're scared that your life is in jeopardy in your country, well, wait a minute, Mexico, relatively safe compared to a lot of their countries, but if you force Mexico to deal with it,
Well, it
They
stops
would-
being a safe place.
It's the
Well-
sheer numbers. There's
And-
just so many people right now, we can't keep up.
but what do you do? I mean, you know, I heard so many of the mayors, the governors say we're a sanctuary city. It's the right thing to do. And now, even New York City's screaming at Biden that you're overwhelming us.
Well, Adams is kind of a terrible mayor, so I don't take anything he says, you
But-
know, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been
Can
a
you say that?
disappointment.
Isn't that Reagan's 11th commandment? Aren't you supposed to not say ill of other Democrats?
Well,
No, that applied to Republicans. It used to, not
Yeah.
anymore.
They walk in
Yeah.
lockstep.
And
and
but we
don't.
never did sign up for that. Actually,
okay.
No.
No.
No, we definitely, when we have a bad Democrat, we identify and criticize.
You got to
That's how
own
we
it,
are.
and there's nobody.
But you know, part of me says, is he just acting out of desperation? Because Chicago, San Francisco, I mean, you're just overwhelming.
Well, let's be clear too. It's, you know, there's this perception that people on the extreme right are trying to deliver to the American public, which is the crisis is they're not bringing us your best, you know, bringing their best. You know, it's
Right.
criminals are coming and they're taking over. That's really not the case.
No.
These are people in crisis, and that's the crisis, and there's just so many of them, and the problem is where do we put them, and how do we house them, and how do we get them work? Like Healy is trying to get work visas for these people so that they can at least support themselves and contribute
While
to
their
society.
cases are being dealt
While their
with.
cases
Criminals are
pending.
coming. Terrorists are coming. What nobody's putting in perspective is 1%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Tiny
to say there's no
So,
criminals coming, no,
I'm
that's
gonna
not.
I'm gonna speak to another elephant in the room, which is that 95% of this hysteria about immigration would disappear instantly if these people were white.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Probably.
You
that-
think so?
Well, look at the
Absolutely.
what about people
You
that
don't think so?
outstay
No,
their visas
absolutely
that are
not.
white?
I think it would disappear if they were middle class and wealthy. But I think if you flooded cities with poor white people, you'd have the same issue. What Lauren's saying.
Well, you'd have-
What do you do with them?
you would have the issue of what to do with them, but you would not have the level of hatred and
Well,
demagoguery about it.
That
That
I'll
is
buy on.
racism.
That I'll buy on.
Xenophobia is racism's little brother.
Right.
And you know, you can't tell me that that's not what's going on here, and that is the motivation why the Republican Party sees this as a good issue for them.
Yeah, a lot of
That's-
Republicans will say that
And
they're
that's why
just-
they want to keep the issue festering
Yeah.
until after the election.
Yeah,
They'll
'cause
say- they'll say-
abortion backfired on them.
Yeah, they'll say
they're
they're
losing on
against
that
the
one.
undocumented immigrants, but in reality, they're against any brown immigrants that come to the country. And they accost them in the grocery store, then tell them to go back where they came from, and all of that. You know, it's just they're trying to cover their bases there.
But isn't that kind of go back to where you came from? Let's see, where did my parents come from? So I
Yeah.
should go back to Portugal?
Got a good story
Right.
about that.
You know, I mean, realistically, come back from where you came from. Unless you're a Native American or whatever the correct political term is, you didn't come from this country.
Right.
That actually happened to somebody I know who was a young lady who grew up in our church, who is the natural daughter of a Native American woman, probably Cherokee, and who has a Native American look in her face and so forth that also looks, it can be interpreted as Mexican because naturally, you
Well,
know,
they're South
they are
American
native people as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I think it's
And-
that they don't look white European.
Yeah.
So,
So somebody, some idiot got on her case and told her to go back where she came from. Well, you know,
How did she
her
know?
ancestors have been here for thousands of years longer than yours have, pal.
Yeah.
but again, what bothers me about that is just the concept.
Yeah.
You know, you think about Milford. There's a new group of people coming into Milford, and people are complaining about the Ecuadorians, who are the new Guatemalans, who are the new Brazilians, who are the new Portuguese,
Right.
who are the new Italians,
Right.
who are the new Irish.
Right.
You know, people who come here, like my grandfather did in '39. He came to Milford in '39 with $32.80 in his pocket, worked hard, and the residents of Milford helped him assimilate. He didn't break any laws, and he was welcomed. And then his family, my grandmother, my mother, her sisters came over, and Milford's been the home forever. So if you tell me, go back to where you came from, I laugh. I said, Milford? The Heights?
Let's see. How far back do you want to go?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so
Should all of us try to squeeze back into the European countries that our distant ancestors came from?
Yeah, I don't have one ancestry, so someone would have to tell me where
Yeah.
I'm supposed to go.
Like-
I'm German,
Like, do I have to
Italian,
go back
Polish.
to? Do I have to go to Wales?
Where do I go? I have no
Germany,
idea.
France?
my youngest
Check out
daughter
the
had the
Switzerland?
greatest answer when they said, what's your heritage? She says, well, I have my purebred side, which is my father, which is pure Portuguese. My mother's American. She got her family's been thrown out of I don't know how many European countries.
Right.
You can't really put a pin down and say you're 8% this, because what's an 8% Belgian or a
Yeah.
10% French? Is that my foot?
I
Yeah,
know.
right.
But all
Have to find
kidding
a border
aside,
for you to live on.
the open border, if you call it a closed border, how are we going to take care of if we don't change anything?
Well,
Well, we got to get people to actually stop using this issue as a way to win an election and actually want
Do
to fix
something.
the problem, because that's the thing that's so frustrating.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a fixable problem. We, Congress has to fund it. Fund it. We have a bill. Just fund it.
And
we'll-
it's a
all
bipartisan bill,
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
But where do you get the money?
It's all, it's in the bill. It's all allocated.
You know
No,
what?
no,
Let's- no, but they, this is, don't even get me started about the money thing, because there's plenty of money for, the defense fund. There's plenty of money for a lot of the programs when they want to come up with the money, but all of a sudden, their butthole puckers up real tight when you talk about, services and other social programs and stuff. So they have the money, they can get the money. All the taxes that they gave the rich, all those tax breaks, where can they get the money? It's right there. There's a way of shifting and cutting back on those tax breaks that they give.
Well, there's always
plenty
ways
of
of
money.
shifting to somebody else. It's like, how do you define when you say the rich? Most of the people I know define it in one way. Somebody who makes $1 more than I do, tax them.
Well, it's the 1%.
Well, look
I
at what
would- I
happened
would-
during Eisenhower's, when he was president, right? Didn't they have the tax
It was
rate
like 35%
jump
or
on
something.
anybody over so
No,
many
it was like
millions of
80.
dollars?
yeah,
And
it was.
80?
Yeah,
Oh, it was crazy.
It was
the
actually
top
more than
bracket
that. It
was-
was 94, I think.
Okay, I
Yeah,
just remember
it was very high.
because we
Yeah.
had people working for us in Sweden where they had, if you made over 100 grand back when I was in Europe, you paid 80% taxes.
Right.
And I had my manager saying, please don't give me a raise.
Right.
Wow.
Because for you to give me $200 a month in my pocket, you got to increase my budget $12,000.
Mm-hmm.
So they found ways around it that, well, you'd have a trip for their family that was non-taxable. You'd have
Right.
a car allowance. That, it's always easy. I mean, we're facing it today in Milford. I went over the budget today, and there's $10 million in incremental capital and expenses. 10 million. I mean, now we in Milford have been very fortunate for 16 straight years. We've had a surplus. 3 million, sometimes 6 million, but not 10.
Right.
And it's easy when you say, well, go reallocate the money. Until you go to somebody and say, well, Glenn, your department's going to lose X.
Yeah. Nonetheless, the amount of money we're talking about is actually pretty small, probably, compared to other elements of the budget. And the real issue is willingness to view this as a solvable problem that we're going to actually deal with instead of something that we're going to use to rile people up because we don't have anything positive to put on the table.
See, I would feel better if we had the money in place, and you can say it's misallocated or whatever, but I don't think we take care of our own people well enough. That our own social programs for veterans.
Well,
and
it's
all.
true that we don't.
That's
That is
absolutely
actually
Right.
true, and we should be fixing that also.
But see,
And-
that to me, the immigrant crisis is proven that we've got the money
yeah,
because we're spending it now.
Right,
and
poorly.
yeah,
Well,
I mean-
regardless, we're spending it.
Yeah.
To say we don't have the $100 we need, but we go spend $100 on the immigrants coming in.
On razor wire in the water.
yeah,
Our
or on
priorities are
on
messed
on
up.
more
Or
patrol
shipping
agents
them all over the place. Well, maybe we should look at, I mean, the what's going on in the other countries that are causing them to come in too. Why are we not addressing that?
Well, we
But
had
didn't
been,
we try
giving
that
aid-
for decades and got our fingers put in the wrong pie?
Well, we had been giving them financial aid to help stimulate their economies. And in theory, that was helping some, but Trump ended that. So I don't know what the status of the aid is now. But I'm certain now that their economies are not doing that well,
Don't
and
we
they're
have-
also being whacked by climate change. You know, a lot of their
Yes.
farmland is not doing so well, so they're unable to generate as much food as they
Right.
as
But
they
again,
need,
take
so.
a step, what do we do? I mean, the Best Western in Milford got emptied out and filled with immigrants that the state's paying for. Now, when you tell me you don't have any money, but
Right.
yet you're paying for a whole hotel,
Yeah, that's a
You're
lot of
getting money from somewhere.
the money's
Yeah.
coming from somewhere. Now, you could argue it's being misspent, but the money's coming from somewhere. So what do we do? I mean, I don't blame Abbott. I don't blame DeSantis
Oh, I very much blame both
Why
of them.
not?
because they can't absorb. If they
But
didn't,
they're not managing
But
it
they're
well.
not-
They're
they're
just
not-
dumping
they're not
it
even
onto
trying
other
to solve
people
the
without
but they
even
got
trying to
attention by
address it.
doing it.
DeSantis
That's
doesn't
all
even
they're
have
after.
a border. DeSantis doesn't even have a border, so
Yeah.
He shouldn't have even been involved in the situation.
Yeah.
Well, if I look at Massachusetts, we're absorbing a lot of the immigrants.
I
Can
think
it continue?
They're well distributed across the U.S., but I think we only have two choices really. Either we continue accepting people, or we wall up the borders,
And how come-
both, and militarize them. And I don't think that's a feasible solution either, and it's not good for democracy. So I would rather take them. We have plenty of money, and we certainly could tax the wealthy
Well-
more. I know you say it's $1 more than I have, but it's really there is a class of people that could live anywhere in the United States easily without earning another dollar more than they have now, and those people should have their assets taxed. They should have their salaries taxed. They shouldn't
Like
have
the
all
rest
these.
of us.
They shouldn't have the special tax breaks like carried interest and other things where they're paying long-term capital gains rates instead of salary rates. There's a lot of things we could do to get more money from the wealthy in this country that
We
we're
could
just
also put
avoiding
some
to do.
But
money
they're
into
also
the
shipping a lot
IRS.
of these immigrants to a lot of the blue states too. You notice that, New York,
Well,
Chicago, Boston.
yeah. Well, that's because
That's by
that-
design.
That's by design. Because it's a publicity stunt. That's why it's being done that way, and so
It's also where the biggest cities are.
For the most
Adams,
part, yeah.
We can. I'm not an Adams fan. I don't know the man from a hole in the wall.
Right.
But I don't think he's got a winning avenue to travel on.
and really it's got not a whole lot to do with him. You'd have to expect a city like New York to take on some percentage of these people, but now maybe the argument for not sending more of them to Arkansas is because the natives will kill them. I don't I don't know, but
And they probably just don't have the housing stock or the kind of economy that can absorb a lot of people anyway.
Well, I mean,
But-
let's face it. That's why. Sorry to interrupt. But that's
Yeah.
why we got the Best Western full in Milford.
Right.
Right.
We have 7 hotels, and we have a large percentage of apartments. So you're going to fill that area quicker than you're going to go to a Weston, where the single family homes are millions of dollars.
Right.
yeah. So there's another angle to this that's important, and you mentioned earlier about the extent to which this immigration is being driven by climate change. That is going to get much, much worse. The number of people coming now and what's going on at the border is a folk dance compared to what is coming if we don't
Address this.
plan for it and understand that the ability to grow crops and the ability to live in equatorial regions is going to become increasingly problematic as time goes on, as the climate warms. And furthermore, the things we need to do both to address climate change from the point of view of mitigation, which is reducing carbon emissions and so on, and adaptation, which is building seawalls and hardening infrastructure and all. There is a vast amount of work that needs to be done, and who's going to do it? We actually an argument can be made that we actually need a lot of these people. and that we should find a way
Well, Rand,
to start making good Americans out
in
of them. and get
Massachusetts,
them.
we have less of a need, but you get out to Farm Valley, California.
Yeah.
Who's going to pick the crops?
Precisely. You know,
I mean, that's terribly, and it sounds racist, and I apologize, but I don't mean it as a color thing. It's a low-income thing.
mhm.
You're not going to get people from Massachusetts who are used to be making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to go make minimum wage picking potatoes.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. And furthermore, it's a question of physical conditioning. You know, to
Don't look at me when you say that.
well, you know, you can look back at me all you want.
My rotundness is for many
you know,
years.
I'm carrying a little more avoirdupois than I should also. So,
But again, to me, we're feeling the effects across the country. And maybe you're right. Maybe North Dakota and South Dakota doesn't have the capacity, so they're feeling it less.
yeah.
But when you look at Milford, the school system in the high school 50 years ago had 220 kids graduating.
Mm-hmm.
For 40 years, we added one kid a year.
It stayed constant.
262 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're adding 200 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So a place like Woodland that we expected to last us for 20 years is at capacity.
Mm-hmm.
The high school, Stacy. And again, I don't have anything against people like my family who came here for the betterment of the family,
Right.
who followed our rules, who worked hard. That's, to me, when they talk about the American dream, that is the American dream. To take care of your family and have your kids do a little better than you. But now you turn around and say, are we not now failing both Americans, and it's mainly low income,
Mm-hmm.
and immigrants?
Well, we're failing Americans because we've redone the economy to favor very wealthy people. And if we change that, everybody would benefit again. It's just that we're not there yet. One thing I'll say about Joe Biden, and he's been the most pro-union president that we've had since FDR. And that is causing wages to go up. And so that is one way that we're going to fix the economy, but there are a lot of others. We have to tax wealthy people a lot more than 50% on any dollar they earn over, let's say, $5 million.
But now, tell me how, I heard this thing about the percentage you pay and all that.
Mhm.
You go to somebody who's paying $2-3 million a year in taxes, and you say, you're not paying your fair share.
Well,
I don't know of any of my friends who are paying
How-
$2 or $3 million in
What
taxes.
kind of millionaires are paying $2 or $3 million in taxes each year? Really?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Today-
I
They're
mean,
not.
look at the Trump tax
yeah,
returns.
yeah.
That's
If
the
you're
whole
doing that, then
basis
you're
of
doing
that.
something wrong
Right.
under the current
Right.
system.
Right. I don't know many. Find out who is paying that
Well, I
kind of
remember
money in
when
taxes.
Stephen
People who
Forbes-
are really wealthy are not paying their taxes.
not.
That's
Yeah.
the whole
That's the
point.
whole
That's the whole
problem.
problem.
They pay about 3% on their taxes.
And again, we put the percentage.
Yes.
But how much is that 3%?
So if you're
It
making
could be
$2
a lot, but
million
who
a year,
cares,
you can afford it.
you can turn around and say, a lot of people would say, Christine, you're rich. You can afford to pay a lot more because you have a house to
I
yourself.
pay plenty in taxes.
I would also say, Al,
I
that
pay
the,
my fair share. I pay
the-
quarterly tax, and on top of that, I got to pay at the end of the year.
the rich are not these Brahmins who know what to do with all their cash to stimulate the economy or optimize things. They're just greedy,
Exactly.
Yeah.
and they put the money in their pockets. That's it. Or they pay politicians to cut them more taxes so that they pay less.
Aren't you just generalizing a lot, though?
No.
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 I mean, when
Not
I
at
looked
all.
at the
Warren
stats,
Buffett said this himself.
Yes.
This
Yeah, an
is
awful lot of
not-
that has been going on.
that 80% of the income tax is paid by less than 20%.
The middle class.
That's true because they earn so much money.
That's right.
And is that bad?
Yes.
It's not bad to earn the money,
it's-
but it's
it's-
bad
it's-
when you don't pay your fair
What it is
share.
It is bad that they're earning that kind of money. Why,
With-
Yeah.
I
why
don't
is
care if they
anybody
earn the
earning
money. I just want them to pay their fair share.
No, but
I do
mean,
care
no,
that
but-
they
And
can
pay
earn
their-
that. You can only earn $1 billion a year by stealing it. There's no other way to do it. You're stealing from somebody. You're stealing from the investors.
You're
You're
not
stealing
paying
from
your
your workers.
workers.
You're stealing from somebody in order to make that kind of money.
People need a living wage.
Well, but living wage, again, what is a living wage?
Well,
Being
There
able
are
to keep-
calculations for that. You calculate based on housing and food costs and all the other
And
things.
I
and
remember
you come
when
up with
the,
a number.
I mean, look at the Newton teachers right now. The teachers in Milford make more.
What?
Yeah.
They're making a mean of $91,000.
I had heard that Milford makes more than Newton teaches.
Yeah.
I would
And
believe that as a normalized number.
What do you mean normalized?
Well, by
number?
the time you take the housing in Milford versus Newton, the
Oh.
expenses.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'll look that up, because
Yeah.
we're right in the middle of setting the budget.
Yeah, you
And
may
I
need
did
to know
not
that.
think that Milford, the mean, that means half, I mean, you know what it means. It means half the teachers are making over 91 grand a year. That seems high to me.
Why?
Are you talking mean or median?
Oh, the difference is going to be nominal difference. Not the average,
Yeah, the median would be
half.
the person who is in the middle, so half above
Half
and half
above, half
below.
below.
That's the median in statistics.
But either
speak.
way, 90 grand
Mm-hmm.
seems like.
What's
uh,
wrong with making 90 grand? How much do you make?
What's wrong
Well,
with?
I'm just saying.
No, but
you
what's
know?
wrong with making $1 million?
Well, I think it's more comparable to compare them to, say, a police officer. Like, what's the average police officer salary in this town?
Sans overtime.
Oh, but you can't do that.
Because
You could turn around and say it's around 100 grand, but you got police officers making 200 because they put in
Yes, a lot of
time and a
overtime.
half. You know, at $60 an
What's
hour.
the base salary?
Well, of course, then you get the state troopers that are
Yeah.
getting like
And
snow blowers and.
Yeah.
Well, they
Did you
got
read
called
about
out
that?
on
Well,
that
but I
too,
mean
as well they should.
that to me
and the
is
teachers
simple.
are working overtime
You're-
and not
you're
getting paid for
taking
it.
Right.
graft.
Yeah.
You should
And they're
be
supplementing
punished.
with their
you know,
own
you just
salary, the school.
excommunicated from the police world. That's any job. You know, I mean, as a lawyer, if you were stealing from your clients,
Oh, yeah, that's frowned upon.
yes.
Bad things can happen
Yeah.
if you get caught doing that.
But
Yeah, no
you know, when you
commingling.
turn around and say the details, people have always complained that police make, you know, an extra 50 grand a year. There's a lot of hours they put in, but more than anything, I believe the logic originally was if you pay police well,
You wouldn't get corruption.
right.
Yes.
And I got to tell you something. When I look, I mean, we're lucky in Milford. And I'll argue for the police the way Milford runs it compared to any place around. You know, we've had 2 demonstrations in Milford about the police, both positive. One of them we stood in the rain to show that we really do care. You know, this is not Minneapolis. As a matter of fact, the one time I've seen town meeting come to a dead stop, you could hear crickets, is when somebody brought up on the floor in the budget meeting, I'd like to propose we defund the police. Everybody in that place, even to a point where Mike Nofree, the moderator, would. I apologize.
It's great.
Our timer is not working, so I'm using my phone.
Oh, God.
But the town has been very supportive of police because the police have earned the trust. And I'd like to see that model get expanded. You know,
Well, why not earn the trust of the teachers and respect them and want to pay them well so they stay in the job and they're enthusiastic and they're passionate about
but
what
what
they
scares
do.
me is when I looked, I think it was the Globe a couple days ago, and they talked about if the school committee agreed to the wage increases, they'd immediately lay off herds of teachers. Because they're going to keep the budget at the same number. So, okay, we're all going to get $10 raises except for you and you, because you're going to get 0. That's what scares me, is when you look at things in abstract, and I don't know what's going on with those negotiations. We've been blessed in Milford with our unions, because the union years ago did something that, and it may be, you're going to be mad at me, but it may be my impression. I never saw a union come up to administration and say, I know you got to cut the budget. we'll give up our raises this year if you keep that money in the school system to save more teachers. Towns around us were saying they'll delay their raises, which doesn't make any sense to me, because if I can't afford to pay you today,
Why would I expect to be able to?
do a double raise at the end of the year. But our union, it wasn't the FinCom going to them. They came to us and said, we'll give up a raise for a year, which is a lot of
I
money.
mean, a lot of, you'd be surprised how many unions are able to negotiate that to save the workers and to get through a tough time.
yeah.
I mean, my
I've heard of
union has
various unions
negotiated
doing
that. Right.
Well,
Yeah,
my
the-
hat was off to them, and 2 years after that, when the economy came back and we had extra money, we fought hard to get the teachers. It was an old debt we owed them to get
But
the-
that's the way it should be negotiated. I mean, people kind of ebb and flow and try to work together to come to a common ground in order to, save the workers, but also to provide the service to the community as well. So, you hurt everybody when, you don't work that like that.
Let's take an issue that nobody would be compassionate about, knocking Trump off the ballot. Fundamentally, we're going to disagree, because I
Why,
don't like
you want
any.
him on the ballot?
No, I don't care. It's Trump. I don't like the idea that somebody's taking away my choice.
But if you break the law, if you go against the Constitution, then what's the point of having a Constitution if you're not going to uphold
No, I'd agree
that
with-
Our
language?
law is beast on the Constitution.
Yes.
Yeah,
So, what Christine is saying, like, it's in black and white. I mean, the only reason, like in Massachusetts, I guess it didn't go forward was because the issue wasn't ripe. Because he's
Yeah.
not officially the nominee.
What happened with
well, there's a
innocent until proven guilty?
We're not
But that's
talking
a
about
criminal
We're talking
standard.
about the Constitution.
Yeah.
well.
Two different things.
There's also there seems to be a difference between primary ballots and general election ballots that has to do with the strange relationship that political parties have to government in our country, because the Constitution originally didn't say anything about them, But so I think, where was it? There was one of the states that, I think it was Michigan, that got a ruling that said that they could not keep him off the primary ballot, because the primary ballot was more sort of something the Republican Party people were doing among themselves, rather than
Yeah.
and so there was a legal rationale for making a distinction there.
Yeah, because our political parties are private corporations. I'm assuming that would
Something
be part
like
of the
that,
rationale.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas when you are voting in the general election, you are voting for an officer of the government.
Do I have too much faith in the American people?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you do.
Yes, you do.
I mean, I'll admit, I am an optimist to sit there and say, I think I'm smart enough to make a choice, and I don't like somebody prejudicing that choice.
If you're worried about your choices being prejudiced, let's go back to 2016 when everybody was fighting on Facebook and nobody realized that actually there were Russian people coming in and influencing everybody, and we had no idea,
That we were being manipulated.
And now we don't have, we have very little in the way of journalism. We have people who live out in rural areas, how do they learn what's going on? And, people who should be responsible, who should be acting in good faith, are not doing that. And I'm not just talking about journalists, that, you've got like I don't mean real journalists, I mean like the cable news people. You've got them, and then you've got people who are just acting in bad faith in Congress, like the monsters in the House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't want government. It's a fundamental thing. They don't want government to work, and they're making it happen to not work.
Well, and actually that is characteristic of authoritarian movements.
Yeah.
is
Right.
Yeah.
You bring democracy to a halt by conflict, confrontation, and chaos.
Yeah.
And then you say,
the media.
and then you say, democracy doesn't work. We need a strong man who will bash
Save
the
us.
heads that needs to be bashed and move us forward. That is the fascist
But do you ever see
Playbook.
that happening here?
Yes.
I do see it
Yes.
happening
We're
here.
shifting to
It's
that.
happening in the United
And it
States
comes
Congress
in
right now.
insidious. It's
Well,
not
one-
going to be an overt thing. It's done very insidiously, don't
One,
you
one
think?
party in particular has embraced that for a number of years. I mean, the Republican Party has fully embraced the concept of having a dictator, and they're working towards it. If you look at Project 2025, which is something the Heritage Foundation has cooked up, they're looking to consolidate all the power in the executive branch under the president. And all the employees that we currently have in the federal government will then be employees of him, not of we the people.
No checks and balances
They'll be
at all.
they will be answerable. Anybody who shows any zeal for the Constitution as opposed to Mr. Trump will be, and
And you really think that could take hold here?
Yep.
Yes.
it will take hold if Trump is elected.
Yeah.
The Heritage Foundation isn't some blogger on
They've been around for a
on their
while.
own Substack or something. This is a very, very influential organization that's been a big part of the conservative movement for decades. And when Ronald Reagan came to power, they had about 2,000 different things they wanted him to do. And Reagan did about 14 or 1,500 of them, radically changing America. And so when they say they want these things, I believe that a lot of them will happen.
And in addition to which, we can see this type of obstructionism going back in the budget battles, where we have hostage taking over the debt limit and hostage taking over government shutdowns, and this business about not passing budgets and having and now not passing this immigration compromise because Trump would rather have a festering problem that he can
Use.
demagogue. That is fascism in operation. That's the way it works.
But couldn't executive orders fix a lot of these things?
Well,
I mean,
You
Trump
can't-
put in all these executive orders, and Biden overturned them. So why can't he put in his own?
Well, Biden can't fix the behavior of the Republican Party by an executive order.
No, but he could institute stay in Mexico, or different options of taking care of
A
it.
lot
because-
of
The
those
Band-Aid
executive orders
solution.
that Trump did weren't even legal. I mean,
Yeah, and those are Band-Aids. I mean, what
Yeah.
we really need is for us to be able to vet people, ID them, and expedite the visa process so that they're able to work. What
Well, and
we've-
just have enough people, enough staffing so that asylum claims can be adjudicated
Yeah.
at something like the rate they come in.
Yeah.
Because these people, like anybody else, have a right to a day in court.
I mean, the big draw for immigrants is the ability to work. And right now, we have a whole bunch of businesses that will hire anybody, including the undocumented. And there's
including
no repercussions.
Trump's businesses.
Yes, absolutely. And there's no repercussions. There used to be. There's still a law in the books where they could be punished. The punishment is ridiculously low. It's like
Well,
a
is there-
$1,000 fine or something.
There were laws in place, because when I had the plant in San Diego reporting to me at Unison, it was made very clear to me that if I hired illegals, personally, I could be prosecuted.
You could be
or
liable, yeah.
liable. Okay, so my
those-
exposure was there, and we were very, very careful.
And those haven't been enforced for 2 generations now.
Yeah, and that's my question. My opinion, if we wanted to stop the overflow on the border, we could do it.
And that's actually, you would have to do some of what we're just talking about just now. You'd have to actually start enforcing laws about hiring people who are not
Got my
legally in the
attention.
country. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it got my attention real fast, because we were in San Diego, which is really close,
Yep.
to make sure that everybody coming over had the proper papers, because I didn't want to get that orange jumpsuit and free room and board.
Yeah, most of us don't
You
want
wouldn't
that.
look good in orange.
No.
But now it's a strategy, like in the meatpacking plants in the South, where they hire a whole bunch of undocumented people, and even kids in many cases, and they work at the plants night and day. And then if they feel like they're trying to organize, or they just want to strike some fear in them, they'll just bring the authorities in to deport a whole bunch of them and bring in a whole new batch, and the cycle will just continue. And they can keep their thumb on the undocumented people by doing that. This has been going on for a very long time.
So it's actually bad for people who are legally trying to work in the country
Yes.
to have competition from people who are under that kind
Sure.
of duress.
I mean, we saw it here in Milford with some of the manual labor, the roofing,
Yeah,
All the building trades are like that. Yeah.
right. So-
where the skill level isn't tremendously high.
Yep.
So you
Yes,
could
need bodies.
you could hire people. Now, again, the exposure to me seemed ridiculous. Somebody falls off a roof. Well, now who is liable to take care of them for the rest of their life?
Well, that's the thing. They don't get any care. They don't qualify for anything. I
If
know.
they're illegal, if they're
Yeah.
in
If
the
they're
country
illegal,
illegally,
I'm
yeah.
saying if they're illegal,
Right.
you're not going to get some sharp lawyer that now helps them out by suing.
No,
The owner of
company-
the house, you mean, that
I
they're
actually
working
know
on?
somebody who. Well, I know somebody who knows somebody who
I know a
had
guy, I
that
know
exact
a guy.
scenario. They tore up their knee. They fell off a roof, tore up their knee, and that was basically it. They couldn't get any income because they couldn't work. I
But
don't know
now-
what happened to them after that, but
Well, who's responsible for that? I mean, when I have work done in my house, we ask, are you licensed? Are you insured? It's annoying to do, but
That's important.
I
to
find
know.
that the people who are honest don't really care. You know, they whip out their papers and say, yes, we have insurance. Yes, we have the licenses.
Yep.
If they told me, well, we don't have those papers, that would be a immediate red flag for me.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are lots of parts of the economy that are operating under the table, though, and and those are parts of the economy that we can't just shut them down. But how do we get to the point where they are working on a legal basis?
Yeah, and that's what seems amazing to me. You have a demand, especially in the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
You have a supply. How come we can't put them together?
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, people who come here, whatever way they got here, I'm going to close my eyes. If they're hardworking, righteous people, if they're selling drugs or committing crimes,
Out.
yeah, out. It's like I invite you into my house, you start breaking my furniture. I want the right to throw you out of my house before you break all the furniture.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
we're not doing it. It's becoming a political nightmare.
It is a political nightmare.
You
It's,
know,
it's all politics.
all
and
the
it
things
doesn't
that
need
we've-
to be like that.
Sorry, Laura.
Yeah.
All the things that we've talked about, the fixes that we need, were in the bill that was agreed upon bipartisanly back in, what was it, 2014 or 2015?
Yeah.
And passed the Senate with 65 votes, I believe. But the House killed it for exactly the reasons that we've talked about, because they want that as a political issue. They want to beat Democrats up with it. It is not, they are uninterested in solving anything. They'll do political theater, you know, they'll ship immigrants around, they'll put razor wire in the Rio Grande, they'll do things like that because to them it doesn't cost anything and it doesn't fix anything.
And
But
it's
shipping immigrants
dehumanizing
around,
these
weren't we
people.
doing that before?
And their voters
DeSantis?
have an appetite for cruelty.
Not
Yeah.
to this
Yeah, that
extent.
too.
And it reinforces the whole white supremacist
is-
structural system that is the United States. And when people say things like "Make America Great Again," which, by the way, did not originate with Trump, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Reagan said it. I mean, when
Trump has not had an original idea in his life.
It
No,
originated
he's
with the
just-
Klan, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Really?
Yes.
Well, now, now come to find out he's saying things on the campaign trail that seem to have been cribbed right from Mein Kampf.
Yes,
Yeah.
Oh,
that
yeah.
too.
And
yeah.
Yeah, he's
then
talking about creating concentration camps along the border for immigrants.
well, and immigrants are poisoning the bloodstream of
Well,
our
that's
what
country.
Hitler
That's
did,
that's real
Demonize
Nazi
a whole
talk.
group
That's
of
silly.
people.
It is Nazi talk. It is not. It's more than just silly. It is very dark and very threatening.
And we need
Poison-
to stop being afraid to sound hyperbolic because,
Yeah.
not
Gotta-
to keep bringing up
gotta give it a
January
name.
6th, but we witnessed in real time.
Yeah.
I'm listening to Liz Cheney's book right now and listening to the testimony from the January 6th committee. And, you know, we just have such a short memory in this country. Like, we
But
witnessed.
do you think January 6th could ever succeed?
Look at what happened.
Do you think they could have not accepted the election?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they
Oh
could
my
have.
There,
God,
there
yeah.
are ways that could have
Wait a
gone.
minute, Biden's president.
All it took was Pence to say,
Yeah.
I want to, delay these votes, and we have to send them back to the states for verification again.
Yeah.
And that would have thrown the whole thing into chaos.
Yeah.
If Trump was just able to get his thugs to kill one congressperson, he could have declared martial law
That's right.
and shut the whole thing down.
See, and that's where I don't believe anybody would sit still for that.
Look at what they
They might
set
not,
still
but,
for
uh,
already.
He wanted to use the military to crush protests, and he's already talking about doing that again. If he does win and we protest, he wants the military.
What was that famous posse comitatus?
Yeah, the Quasi Comitatus Act. Yeah.
I mean, doesn't that tell us that you ain't doing that?
Yeah, but that was.
but
that
that
goes back to, like,
assumes
the Civil
that
War,
assumes
right?
that laws are going to operate
Yeah.
under a Trump regime.
You have martial
the
law,
second
and
time
all the
around.
regular laws go out the window, and it's a militant rule.
I just have a hard time believing that we would accept martial law.
Well, but what are we going to do?
For
gonna
what
do?
reason?
So I hope you will join us in the streets when it becomes necessary to flood the streets and shut the country down and say we will not live under a fascist dictatorship. We insist upon constitutional democracy.
There were
Because
certain
it may come to
principled-
that.
There were
may.
certain principled people who stepped in at the right time to save us from ourselves.
This
Really.
happened before World War II.
Yeah.
You talk about how there's a lot of people that wanted fascism. There were a lot of people in this country that supported Hitler. And it wasn't until they attacked Pearl Harbor and then a lot of that kind of, we bound
Subsided.
together, subsided. But there was a lot of
But animals like
anti-democracy.
that
Nationalism.
tend
Yes.
to burn out.
There were a lot of Republicans on Hitler's payroll.
Yeah.
I bet
to-
there were a
to-
lot of Democrats too.
I don't know about that. Well, I don't know. Maybe a certain segment in the South, maybe, but it was mostly Republicans who were creating a lot of ruckus about us getting involved in World War II because they knew, number one, a war is always good for the incumbent president, but also they were in favor of what, at least on the surface, what Hitler was doing. I don't know that they know the full story of what he was doing, but certainly the fascism part they were fully on board with.
And there were a lot of anti-Semitics too.
Yes.
Father Coughlin was an
Yeah.
enormously influential public figure, kind of like Rush Limbaugh, only on steroids and with a much larger
See, you
percentage
talk
of the
about
country listening to him.
anti-Semitism. I don't understand how people can accept that, because to me, and I'll get in very big trouble, Hitler wasn't just anti-Jewish. He was anti-everything except him.
Well,
If he
gays,
ran out of Jews and gays and gypsies and
Gypsies.
Catholics,
He would start in on some other people, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. He
Right.
wasn't just, I don't like Jews and I'll stop after I've killed every Jew, which is bad enough. But he would have gone after, that kind of sickness is just fueled, in my opinion, by hate.
Well,
Well, it
fascism requires a new victim constantly, a new person they can single out, or a new group that
Target.
can single out.
And
Yeah, because it's the self-victimizing, right? You know, the MAGAs are the victims. You know,
Right.
you enemies out there are coming and you're ruining all the good
Right.
stuff
Well,
for
Trump
us.
is a victim, right? They're picking on me. They're
Yep.
mean. He wasn't nice to me.
He's exposing the deep state, don't you know?
right.
Well, a lot of people bought on because the more he got legal action against him, his popularity kept going up.
Right.
And
So
they're
you
giving
keep
us
saying you
money
don't
to
understand
flood.
how this has appeal, and I think we need to ask you to accept that it does have appeal. You know, and I wish I could explain it better. Also, it makes no sense to me either.
But you know, realistically, it's like when people say, how could that animal go in and kill kids in the school?
Right.
You can't understand that animal unless you're cross-wired the same way the person is.
Yeah.
Fascist movements are inherently irrational. It's largely on
emotion.
emotion, and the persecution complex that a lot of right wingers have. This, the idea that people might be going after Trump because he's so great and is trying to liberate everybody, and they're just trying to tear him down. I mean, this has a lot of appeal to them. It's a story. It's a dumb story, but it's a story that hits all their paranoia and persecution.
But yet,
complex.
almost half the voters in this country went that way.
And it is the standard fascist story. In Germany, it was the stab in the back legend, the Dolchstoßlegende, that the Jews and the leftists and so on stabbed Germany in the back at the end of the World War I.
I don't think it was it was them. You needed a them.
Right, you have to have a them to be your enemy.
Right. The
And-
Jews
and-
were
and
just
and that's the-
convenient targets.
Dehumanize them by
right.
them. They're out there, and you don't see them as a human anymore.
Right,
But
and the
you know-
logical extension of that, the logical conclusion to that is to exterminate them in
That's right.
camps.
Well, my daughter ran into it at camp, it's YMCA camp, when somebody said, "Don't play with Chelsea," which was her best friend, and she said, "Why?" "She's a Jew." So my daughter comes home at 8 years old and said, "Dad, what's a Jew?" I didn't know how to answer. I said, "People who go to church on Saturday instead of Sunday." And she said, "Well, that's silly. Who cares?" I said,
There you go.
Go to the head of
You
the
know what I
class.
to me, it was simple. You shouldn't care. Do you like Chelsea? Yes. Then play with her.
Is Chelsea a nice girl?
That's it. Well, last question, because we're running out of time.
Okay.
Who are you more worried about, Nikki Haley or Trump?
That's a tough question. I would say Trump.
Yeah,
I
Trump.
think, though, that if Trump is set aside somehow, either by 14th Amendment rulings or by convictions or something, Haley would be more difficult to defeat for the Democrats.
Do you really think, though, that she would become as
Virulent?
extreme as Trump would?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't trust her, and I don't think she'd be good for the country, and I don't think she'd be healthy. If she did win, I hope to God that she's trying to be this ridiculous in order to get the nomination, but then a lot of times they shift more moderate in order to get the general
Well-
election.
Well,
She-
Glenn,
she-
you got the last word.
The Republican Party does not have a positive agenda for America. They just don't. So their hope is to divide the country, scare their constituents, and hopefully they can still come out on top. If they can suppress the vote enough, they can win the election. That's what they're hoping for. Haley would give them more opportunity to do so because she's less of a known commodity, and Trump has already seared into everybody's brain what he's about, and he's fairly unpopular. So.
And I'll admit, I was one of the people a couple years ago who said, "Why is CNN keeping the Trump legend alive?" He's gone, he's done, and yet he's back. As always, stay tuned. A few months from now, we'll see how many of these predictions come true and what shift we've seen. We've seen the effects locally, nationally, and internationally, which we didn't have a chance to go over. But I do thank our 6 loyal viewers. As always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you.